Heidi ho, good neighbors. What's going on? It's Phil Russer with Creatorcon Q&A episode 130. As always, we try to deliver the talent, and we have one of my favorite writers of all times in comic books on tonight. He's a great guy, and no, he didn't pay me to say that. So we're happy to have him on. The last time he was here, we had a bad storm, so we had to postpone, but blue skies in Florida. All right. So before we get started, please share this out. Let everybody know we're here. We're going to talk about the illustrious career of our guest, as well as new projects that are going on that you may not be aware of. But without further ado, one of my favorite writers, legendary writer of comic books, Chuck Dixon.
Hey, greetings, people of Earth.
What's going on? How
um,
you doing?
just busy and happy about it. So,
Yeah, we were talking about it behind stage where, if it's not Batman, people think you're not working. But the truth is, you're constantly busy. You're writing, 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 whether
yeah.
it's with indie publishers, your own books, which we're going to talk about. You stay busy. So, I mean, what's the secret to keep going?
Well, in comics, it's not being a specialist. I never just wrote superheroes or just wrote horror. I'll write any genre in the medium. As long as I'm interested in the franchise or the characters. But I can do SpongeBob SquarePants. I can do Conan the Barbarian, and
Can you do them
because
together?
yeah, I could do them together. Well, there's a crossover. That's the key to comics' future is crossovers, exactly like that. But
With 50 variant covers.
exactly. And one has to be embossed, another one has to be gold leaf. But so yeah, I just never specialized. So whenever they needed something done, they would say, "Yeah, Chuck could probably do this." You know.
When you were first starting out, though, was there like a nervousness to writing, especially if you had a tight deadline and they're like, "Hey, we need you to take care of this in this short amount of time"?
Well, no, not yeah. I mean, no, because when I first started, even when I was still just part time, I would get a call from Cat Ironwood at Eclipse, and she would say, "We're putting this Tales of Terror issue together, and we're 3 pages short on content. Can you come up with something?" And I said, "Well, give me a half hour," and then I would go away, and then I would call her back and say, I got an idea. Would this work?" And she said, "Yeah, write it," because they were like days away from having to go to the printer. And
So the pressure was off of you because they just had to have something out there.
yeah, it really didn't matter. And those things were challenging. They were fun. I wrote one of my best horror stories. It was a 3-pager because they were short. It's a story people still ask me about. But
And what story is that?
it's called Leftovers, and this little boy talks to his father because they're throwing out a refrigerator, and his father's taking the door off, and he says, "Why are you taking the door off?" And he goes, "Well, because sometimes children get inside and they get trapped in there and they die because they run out of air." And then the father, because fathers can be cruel, teasing kids, he tells them a story that they absorb all the bad smells, and that turns them into a zombie. And the kid's like, "Whoa," right? And then he runs into the garage and he opens the freezer, and there's a little kid zombie in there. And he says,
Oh boy!
they know about you.
And that was a 3-pager.
3-pager.
That's cool. Now, have you ever gotten to a point where maybe you had a little writer's block and you were stumped and you had a deadline? And if so, what did you do to get out of that?
Well, I generally stay way ahead of deadlines. Anybody who's ever worked with me as an editor will tell you that. At DC, they stopped sending me the deadline sheets that they send everybody every month because I was they were irrelevant. I was already past them. One of my editors at Marvel, Tim Toohey, actually got in trouble with the other editors because he handed in an issue of Punisher War Journal 90 days before the deadline.
Oh, really?
And they wouldn't talk to him for weeks. Because if you know anything about Marvel is everything last minute. If I had a nickel for every time I've seen 2 editors coloring a cover together, one starting from the top, the other starting from the bottom.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. It's a
I didn't know they were
madhouse.
that bad.
It was always a madhouse at the bullpen. I think that was an energy that they liked, But yeah, I just work way ahead of schedule. I don't believe in writer's block. If I'm stumped on an idea, and you know, if you're writing a novel, especially, you're going to get stumped every once in a while. You're like, I'm not sure of the way forward here. And I just, you know, go for a walk, take a long drive, you know, get on the treadmill, you know, anything but write. And I just don't worry about it. And if you're far ahead of deadline, you don't have to worry because you've got time.
Now, what's your writing process? Do you outline everything ahead? Do you write straight off the top of your head and then go back and do edits? I mean, how do you do it?
Comics, I just go in, start writing. I mean, I have an idea what I want to do, obviously.
Right.
As long as I got my opening, I'm ready to sail. You know, I pulled anchor and I'm going. And I write it, I finish it, I send it in. Scott Peterson, one of my Batman editors, once said, "You don't read these things before you send them out, do you?" And he was referring to the fact that I'm terrible about misnumbering pages. So I'll hand in a script that has 2-page 16s, you know.
That makes me feel better because I do that to my artist too. And he
I do it all the
"Do
time.
you even look at the page count?"
35 years, I still do it. People go,
That's
"What do we
great.
do here?" You know, DC was great because if you ran a page over, they would say, "Well, just write a page shorter next month," as long as it all evens out. Marvel was not so forgiving.
Submarine Treehouse said, "Phil, oh, there's
Hey,
Chuck too." And then Rod asked, "Is there a blueprint or a hero's journey step-by-step recipe for writing a script you follow?"
no, that's Joseph Campbell crap, and I don't believe in it. It puts too much of a template. It explains why so much of Hollywood output is uninteresting, because all of the producers read A Hero's Journey or The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and they think they know, they think they understand story, and they don't, because it's got to be seat of the pants. You can't surprise readers if you're always doing the hero who's reluctant. You know, it's like,
It's
I'm
funny
so
that you said that because that was my big complaint about all these Disney shows right now. It's break down the hero's emotional state, and he has to be lifted up and saved by somebody else to be the hero he was in the beginning. And it's just so played out.
yeah. It's like the recent Star Trek movies. You know, Captain Kirk's always losing his captaincy or in danger of losing his captaincy, and it's like, I don't care about Starfleet politics. I just want to see Captain Kirk kicking ass.
And
You know,
finding a way out of what you think is an unwinnable situation. That was his appeal.
yeah, and not fighting with the admirals. Oh
Right.
yeah, I mean, I reject all, and I've rejected it from the beginning. I just think it's not, you know, not to put down the person who posted there, but you know, stay away from that stuff. Get away from it. Get your head out of that stuff.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I made this mention. Someone said, writing templates and how you're supposed to write a script. And I said, if Todd McFarlane listened to that, where would he be right now? Because they told him you can't put Spider-Man's knee behind his head, and you can't. The spaghetti webbing makes no sense. And now everybody's doing what Todd did, and look at him; he's a legend in the industry. So, I think if you do it right, everybody's like, "Oh, he broke the mold. That's awesome." If you do it wrong, it's why didn't you follow the mold?
Well, the thing about Tom McFarlane is he just never listened to anybody. That was his mutant ability. He just didn't give a crap what anybody said. He was going to do what he wanted to do. If he wasn't having fun, he wasn't going to do it. So, sometimes writers don't have that luxury, but there's ways around editors.
How long did it take you before you figured out that way around?
Well, first of all, I from the very beginning never apologize. I think Kat Ironwood considered me one of her favorite writers when she braced me on a very controversial subject, and I wouldn't back down. And I think she realized, oh, okay, this guy's for real. And then with editors, I usually agree with them, even if their ideas are idiotic. But I have a 80%, 20% rule. I'll give them 20% of what they asked for, and they'll be happy. They won't realize I didn't do everything they asked for.
Right. That reminds me of that meme where a guy goes to a man, he goes, "What is the secret to life?" He goes, "Never argue with fools." And the guy goes, "I disagree with you." And he goes, "You're right."
Exactly.
So you heard it here, people. So, I mean, you have a lot of projects going on, and we're going to get into everything you're doing now. But were there any titles or characters that you never got to write that were on your bucket list, or your wish list, or that you really would have loved to have done? Or is there a character that you would have liked to have retconned and revamped?
Yeah, I'm not really into retconning and revamping. I like to write the classic characters the way they were meant to be. I did a GI Joe podcast yesterday, and they were talking about my reboot of GI Joe, of Larry Hama's GI Joe, and I said it really wasn't a reboot. It was just like kind of a soft reimagining,
Right.
but I didn't change anything. I didn't change any of Larry's characters because why would I?
Right.
And But as far as characters, I would have loved a long shot at Fantastic Four, like a year or 2 year run. In recent years, I've been really interested in Superman, you know,
I would
uh,
love to see you do Superman. Getting
because
him
it's a
back was the
challenge.
truth.
It's a challenge to make him. It's not a challenge to make him interesting. He's a great character, but to be able to mine that and show people, hey, he's a great character in his own right. You don't have to add gimmicks and gewgaws and events to make this guy a really cool character.
I would love to see you do a long Superman run. Hell yeah. Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I think our society right now, between the instant gratification and how dark everything is, I don't think they find him to be too wholesome and corny. And
Right,
I'm like, he's the character we're supposed to reach up to and aspire to be. Don't bring him down to us. We have to be going up to him, or at least
right,
trying to.
right.
And I think writers don't get that. They want to make him so flawed and so human that, look, that to a degree, I think that's interesting. But if you bring him all the way down to us or lower,
Right.
what do we have to look forward to? I mean, he's supposed to embody his being a Superman. To me, wasn't about having superpowers. It was having all the character that we should aspire to have: nobility, honor, integrity, humble. You know, I mean,
Well,
think about it. If you had the ability to do what he did, and you're standing online with that person who's counting pennies, you wouldn't like just and blow him away.
just use your X-ray vision to give them cancer.
Oh, jeez.
Well, I mean, there's so many characters that people look upon. They go, well, they're not nuanced. Superman is so nuanced. There is so much there. You say, okay, he's a character that we don't all look up to. He's a paragon. That's true. But remember, Superman is an alien trying to get along in a human world. So he's trying to be as human as possible. So while we're reaching for him, he's reaching for us. I mean, that is such a cool aspect to the character.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and the one that they all miss out on, is at the very bottom, the appeal of Superman is he's a badass. He
Yeah.
is a bad. Nobody defeats Superman. And yeah, he's super strong and everything else, but he's got challenges too. And you got to and to do a great Superman story, you got to come up with this massive challenge for him that he's always going to overcome. And he's going to overcome it without killing people.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
he's a fascinating character, and I've gone back to like the reading a lot of like 50s and 60s Superman. It's like, man, there's so much appeal here. No wonder this character is so hugely popular.
Yeah. And these days, everybody wants to draw him angry with red laser eyes
Oh
and
yeah,
just,
no,
it's
no,
like total.
no.
We
I
have the
mean,
Hulk for that. We have the Hulk.
you wake up in the morning and you're Superman, and you're going to be like depressed and dark. I don't think so. You wake up in the morning and go, I can literally do anything I want today. If I
And I
want to
always
write my
thought that
name on
was,
the moon, I'm going to go do it.
and I always thought that was part of his power and his appeal too, is the self control that he must
Yeah.
have. I mean, we lose our temper all the time. He loses his temper, and a city gets destroyed. You
Right.
know?
Well, the other thing is the temptation to basically become a fascist. I remember
Right.
proposing to Mike Carlin in Elseworlds, in which Superman simply gets tired of saving people all the time, and he imposes all these safety regulations on the planet, and he basically turns us all into children, so he doesn't have to keep watching over us all the time because he's getting tired of that. Mike was horrified, but I thought, it'd just be a fun story to write.
Yeah, I used to like when they did Elseworlds and stuff like that too, because you could explore different things without breaking up continuity. But they've scrapped a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Dean wanted to ask you, and this is a popular series of yours, Winterworld. Any chance of more of it in the future?
Yeah, I'm
I have a
talking with
lot of
people
Winter World
now.
fans.
Yeah, I'm talking with people now, and they're very much interested in Winter World, and continuing it in a lot of different venues, including comics. So, more on that later.
Very cool. All right, you heard it here. Rod said that was Cobra Commander writing his name in the moon.
Well, you remember on the Tick, Chairface Chippendale, he didn't get to
Yeah.
finish writing his name.
What is your favorite genre to write? Horror, comedy, superhero, straight up,
It's a tie between westerns and war. I like both of those genres. They were, the bulk of my comic book collection is western and war comics, and they've always found. I love the superheroes, obviously, but though if I had to write, I had to pick two genres to write in. Those would be the ones.
Yeah, like I know that you're a historian. You love history. You've studied it. You really focus on it. Is there an era in history that you really love the most?
Well, I'm not really a historian. I describe it as a toy soldier fascination with history. So, yeah, I mean, growing up, I loved anything about the Roman Empire, and I like stuff about the Victorian era. The different colonial wars and stuff like
Right.
that, where it's a clash of cultures. The Boxer Rebellion or the Zulu War. That stuff fascinates me because I mean, the Zulu War. I mean, it is just freaking amazing. You got an army on the level of a Napoleonic army, armed with spears and shields, and they take over the bottom half of the continent and cause havoc across the entire continent. Until they run into a modern army who they at first annihilate. It just fascinates the hell out of me.
Do you ever use any of those historical moments as inspiration for stories you write in superhero books?
Not so much. Unless I'm doing a time travel story, I don't really like recreate, like do analogies
Okay.
to historical events. My mind just doesn't work that way. I never thought of doing that.
I knew you were one of my favorite writers in the '90s when I really was never a big Robin fan, and you did the Tim Drake, and I was like, wow, this is good, man. And I collected the whole run. Um, I mean, I wish we could get back to the glory of comics. I really do. Um, where do you see comics now, and where do you see it going in the future? I mean, mainstream comics.
Well, it's kind of become like the music industry. It's broken into niches with crowdfunding and smaller independent publishers. So you got a lot of what I call garage band comics. But when you look at them, it ain't garage band music. These are like really professionally done comics. I mean, you have these crowdfunding kings like Brian Pulido and Graham Nolan and obviously Ethan and Billy Tucci and now Eric July, who has become the king of
Yeah,
kings by
yeah,
raising a
really.
freaking fortune in one day. God bless that man. He put the work in, and you look at these comics and it's like, well, this is better than anything the big two are putting out. All of them are superior to
I
anything the big
agree.
two is putting out. And it's all passion and love. And these are guys who are found themselves unemployed or underemployed in the comic book industry and just said, well, I want to keep doing this. And they found a way. And that's kind of the future. I think they are the future. Eventually, these guys aren't going to be crowdfunder people anymore. They're going to be retail publishers. That's where it's going to go.
And
And
that's the thing is distribution is the key right now because
right.
Kickstarter is not going to be able to fill that distribution. And with Diamond losing so many accounts, do you see Diamond picking up a lot of these indie people?
Maybe on a retail level, but that's not really going to shore up the retail comic book industry. That's not going to shore up the direct market. That's not going to be enough. I don't think there's anything that's going to save the direct market unless Marvel and DC were able to turn the ship around. But I don't see that happening. No matter if you brought in an army of super talented people to Marvel and DC and had them do the best work of their lives, it's still an uphill battle because they skipped a generation of readers.
Right.
There's a whole generation of young people, and possibly two generations, that simply were never exposed to comics. And if they do read comics, they're reading manga because that's what they were exposed to. So, it's going to be an uphill battle. In one of my videos recently, I suggested that the way to get readers back is to do the craziest crossovers imaginable. Predator meets Freddy Krueger, just whatever you can think of.
Right.
Because to create a comic that younger readers would have to have, they would have to have this comic, and bring people back in that way, because that's the only kind of event that's going to work. You can't make someone go into a comic shop and they're simply not on the newsstand anymore. Where does a kid see comics for the first time?
And I think there's another issue that people don't address is when you and I were growing up, right? I'm pretty sure I'm in your generation. We had a leg in our parents' generation and a leg in our own. Like I was watching Little Rascals regularly every day. And
Three
the old
Stooges,
Superman,
Little Rascals, yeah.
And the old Superman while I was watching Thundercats and G.I. Joe cartoons. I was introduced to Elvis and Three Dog Night while I was listening to Genesis and Rush.
Right.
So I think some of that stopped. And the generations, they don't know anything before them.
Well, that's been a problem in comics for a while. And that's the problem. It comes down to the people running the big two and some of the larger indies. These people are tourists. They're not comic book lifers. Like when you got into the fandom and I got into the fandom, probably the same thing. We wanted to know everything. It's like Hawkman. I want to know everything about Hawkman. I want to see Hawkman's Golden Age stories, and I want to know who worked on it and who created it and everything else. Well, these tourists don't care about any of that. They only care about adding Marvel and DC to their resume when they go to apply at MTV. So that's a huge problem because it shows in the comics. I said before we went on the air, my biggest problem with the big two is that their editorial staffs are indifferent to the medium. They really don't care. They only care about themselves and making trouble. But you got to know the history. I mean, if you become a jazz musician, you would find out the history of jazz. I mean,
right.
You wouldn't just say, well, I bought a record last week and that's where my history begins.
It's like when you write a book, if you have to do some research and history on what you're writing about, otherwise, how could you possibly give a solid portrayal in the story?
Well, also to ignore sometimes 85 years of continuity, right, which is this rich mine of material that you can go back and look at and go, wow, that's a really cool idea. I'm going to use that or play on.
I think they look at it as an expense because they have to have people that go and do that back research to keep continuity. Like the little yellow boxes we used to get,
Yeah.
I don't think they want to hire people to go into that research and do that either. It's easier to just reboot and not have to worry about that.
I don't so much care about the continuity but the thing is that this feeling from editors has trickled down to a lot of creators. I meet creators who don't know anything. And if you ever talk to a cosplayer, they don't know who the hell they're dressed up as. They don't know anything about them.
They look cool though.
They look cool. That's all that matters. Like, whoa, this is a sexy costume. He's like, and that's all you know about it.
And it's funny because I mentioned this the first time you and I talked. Bane, to me, could have been up there with the Joker as the greatest Batman villain. They totally went the wrong way with him, and maybe you could blame the movie or not, but they made him like a hulking, physically imposing guy. That's not, to me, that's not what you wrote. He was strategic. He matched his intellect. He tested Batman, studied Batman, wore him down because he knew what Batman's personality was.
Right.
He was playing Batman's personality against himself. And when he finally had him at his weakest moment, after he planned all that, that's when he used his strength to break his back.
Right.
Bane's strength was his intellect and strategic ability. And they totally stripped him of that.
Yeah, well, it'll come around. It'll come around. I don't worry about that stuff. This stuff always comes. And the thing is, he's extraordinarily popular. I mean, I just saw they released a new Todd McFarlane Bane today. They released it today, and it's sold out today. And you can't find one of them for love or money right now. So they're going to be on eBay for $1,000 in a couple of months.
Exactly.
It's crazy. I had to make a deal with a guy. He said, I bought 2. If you'll sign one, I'll give you one. I said, okay, deal. I said, and I'll buy you lunch.
I'll sign it and little lip prints on it too.
Yeah. And somebody said, well, wouldn't McFarlane give you one? I said, yeah, they would. They're very nice people, but I don't want to scrounge.
Chris Borman says he loved the Tim Drake spoiler series. I agree. Apparently he's not interested in spoiler anymore. He said Vengeance of Bane is his all-time favorite book.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Dean asked, biggest hurdle you faced as a writer? Obviously not late script submission.
Just those first breaks is the biggest hurdle. Getting somebody to, if you're an artist and you show somebody an amazing piece of artwork, oh wow, you hand them a script and they go, I got to read this. Yeah. But thankfully, coming into the business, Archie Goodwin was so generous and so kind with his time. He would actually read my stuff a lot of times in front of me, which made me sweat bullets. But he was always helpful and encouraging. And I mean, for years before I got in the business, he just a terrific guy. I guess he saw something in me, the enthusiasm, and he encouraged it. Because the stuff I would show him was miserable. It was just awful, poorly thought out, just the ravings of a madman. But somehow he always made sense out of it. He would go, well, if this character did this, I'm like, oh my God, you're right. The story's 100% better now.
Well, speaking of which, then, who would you say you would consider a mentor, or at least gave you the best wealth of knowledge in the industry as a writer?
Larry Hama would be number one. He really, once you got past his prickly pear personality, he was just the nicest guy in the world.
He's a weird guy.
He's different, but man, he's different in a lot of really good ways too. I mean, but he puts every professional through the ring of fire at the beginning, and it's to test you to see if you'll come back. And if you stand up to him and come back, then he'll consider hiring you. And then when he looks at your work, but he hired me, bought some stuff, and then said, well, you have to do this, you have to do that, and look at this. I mean, I remember I took my buddy Flynn Henry up with his portfolio and showed him, he showed his portfolio to Larry. And Larry sat down with his artwork and he put tracing paper over it. And he said, look, you need to fix this and this and this, and it really improve your artwork. We're leaving the offices, and Flint says he hated me. I said, look, he didn't hate you. He didn't call you any bad names.
He took the time to do that.
Well, he met you for the first time, and he didn't say something horribly discouraging to you, because that's what he would say to every creator he met for the first time. And he didn't do that. And he sat down with a piece of tracing paper. I have never seen him do that. He really dug your stuff. He really liked your stuff. But he's probably, but I worked with Archie and with Denny O'Neil. I mean, Denny O'Neil's a huge influence as well. Archie, an enormous influence. So, I've been very lucky with mentors and people showing me the way.
Greg Capullo said the same thing about Larry Hama at Fan Expo Chicago last weekend. Larry Hama.
Yeah, just to tell you a Larry story. Lee Weeks called Larry on the phone early in his career. He called him on the phone at Marvel and says, I want to come in and show you my portfolio. And Lee told me the story, so I'm not telling tales out of school. And Larry said, don't bother, you suck. And Lee said, oh, you've seen my work. And Larry says, no, I've never seen your work. I can tell by talking to you on the phone, you suck. And Lee said, I went away and I never approached him again. I said, that was your mistake. I said, if you had come back at him and said, well, I'm coming in anyway, then you would have been working with Larry Hama.
Yeah, you should have said, well, you know what? Until you look, you have no opinion.
Yeah, well, and F you, I'm coming in would have worked better.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine who's just, a small-time indie artist, actually I rep him. We were at a show in Brooklyn right before the pandemic, and he went over to Larry, and Larry was hard, but he wasn't deflating. There's a difference. Like Neil, rest his soul, Neil would crush. He just crumple your crap up and throw it out right in front of you. He was mean. He would kick you in the teeth, knock you down, spit on you, kick you again, say get up, and then when you get up, he'd kick you down again. But
Yeah, but
Larry was hard, but he took the time, like you said, with the tracing paper to say, look, this is what you need to work on. Come back to me and show me when you get this right.
yeah. Well, Neil did that to working professionals. I got read the Riot Act by Neil a couple of times.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't like stuff I was doing with Robin. So
Really?
I was like, okay.
Sean said that Capullo and Hama had an exchange of curse words.
I can imagine those two wouldn't get along. I can imagine those two would not get along.
Well, I mean, if you just look at Larry's posts, he doesn't shy away from what he's thinking or feeling, and he'll tell anybody to go F themselves 7 ways to Sunday.
Well, he's unfriended me like a dozen times.
Yeah, he unfriended Billy. Yeah.
And then he DMs me and says, "Look, this isn't about being friends." Or it's like, I understand. Look, I understand, man. I said, I'll cut you. You know, if you came burn my house down, I'd probably say, "That's okay, Larry. It's okay."
Chris was asking, will you be doing any cons in the Northeast? I sculpted a spoiler statue years ago, and I had Tom Lyle and Scott Hanna sign it. It's missing your signature.
I don't have any plans. I'm definitely not doing any cons for the rest of this year. I'm going to get back into it next year, but I really don't foresee, I mean, being perfectly honest with you, don't foresee me leaving Florida unless, you know, somebody said recently they were going to make me go to San Diego eventually, but yeah, I'm probably not going to be up in the Northeast anytime soon. That could change.
I'm waiting for everything to get more stable and secure before I run my show. And you, obviously, I plan on reaching out and inviting you as a guest. I'll take care of you. And if that's the case, Chris, then maybe you'll see him at my show. You'll see.
There we go.
I'm going to sit you, Graham, and Billy together, the three of you. It'll be
all
like
right.
The three amigos. I'm even going to get you the Mexican hats, and you can sit there and wear them. Aaron said, "You both rock."
Oh, thank you, Aaron.
And roll.
No, apparently we just rock.
Yeah. Now we're going to get into a lot of projects you're working on right now. But you know, obviously people are fascinated about you and your career and this and that. You're constantly staying busy with independent writing, whether it be prose books or comic books or, you know, things of that nature. Are you for hire for independent publishers that, I mean, because I know you've done a few things that say reach out and I have this project idea, but I want a professional writer to write it. You know, are you for hire in those circumstances?
Yeah, I mean that's if they've got the money and it's an interesting project that I think I can bring something to. I'm not going to say yes to something and just phone something in.
Right.
I never have, but these days I've got my pickup project, so why would I do that?
Right.
And are they going to have a good artist? Do they have a distribution? Am I ever going to see this comic produced?
Right.
Do they have a distribution plan in mind? Those kind of questions. I want to get a little more involved and just write something and get a paycheck because I really, I want to see it become a comic.
Well, it's a testament to you though to have that integrity in it. Aaron Sarge said he wishes he met you, but Phil, Graham, and Billy and others were awesome at Garden State Comic Fest. Oh, shucks. Clayton Merwin, how are you, sir? Hey, Chuck, good to see you, old friend. Been a minute. You are looking well, brother.
Well, thank you, Clayton. Thank you.
Very cool. So we have a couple of things that we want to show, and I'm going to share screen if you don't mind. I know,
Sure.
You're a handsome chap, but...
Goes without saying.
Now this the artwork on it, we'll show the Kickstarter first. This looks just phenomenal in my opinion. Hunter Ninja Bear. Do you want me to play the trailer?
Yeah, play a little bit of it. Okay. I guess it's not that long. Play all of it.
Yeah, I don't know how long it is. We'll find out.
It's like a minute, I think.
All right, I'm gonna big screen it for a minute, and we'll do this. So I have to say that is a visually stunning book. It's probably
Yeah.
one of the most professional and beautifully illustrated indie books I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And you pair that with your writing, and it's an obvious knockout of the park. Um, but their goal was very high. It was
Yeah.
50 grand.
Yeah.
So I mean, by most means, first Kickstarter, this is very successful with 13 days to go, $13,000, 282 backers. But they have quite a journey to get to their goals. So, guys, anybody watching this, after watch, etc., let's go pledge and back this. You can't go wrong with Chuck, obviously, and then the art is just stunning. So, they approached you with a pitch and they asked you to write it. How did that work?
Well, Rob Hunter, who's inking it, he's a friend, and we ran into each other at a con, and he said, I'm working with these guys called Phenom Comics, and they have this idea, and I told them you'd be perfect for it. Do you want to come on board? And I said, well, let me talk to them. And, they met my criteria for the kind of people I like working with. And the idea was outrageous. The premise of this is outrageous. And they basically wrote a movie treatment for it, and they included a lot of research. I had to do a lot more research, but that's the way it goes. But the spine of the story was so strong, and then they completely let me run with it. I added characters, I changed a lot of things, I added some situations, I changed their ending and everything else, and they were fine with, they were happy with all of it. And so we ended up with a 360-page graphic novel, which I have to stress is completed. This isn't something you're going to pledge for and not get for 5 years. It's completed. It'll be fulfilled shortly after the campaign is over. 360 page, for what? They're asking $30. I mean, that's a pretty damn good deal. So yeah, I mean, it was a tremendous writing experience because, I love to do the research. And the basic premise is in the early 1800s, the ninja clans were driven into hiding. And because the new world order, the new order in Japan wanted them dead, and so this one clan becomes farmers, but suddenly they're plagued by these carnivorous, enormous bears, man-killing bears, and they don't know how to deal with it, and they're nearly wiped out, and they send an envoy to the United States to hire professional hunters. So they bring back a whole bunch of mountain men to Japan to hunt down and drive to extinction this group of bears. And that's the basic premise, but it's a true historical epic. There's all kinds of, this is like James Clavell territory with this enormous ensemble cast and all these different subplots run, and betrayals and all the usual stuff, and tons and tons of bloody action. So
do you also explore the cultural differences?
Oh yeah. I mean, can you imagine the cultural differences in the 1800s?
Yeah.
Because we got some Native American characters who come along with them, and that's where the greatest cultural difference is between the Japanese and the Native Americans. But it's there's a lot going on in this book.
Wow. So, I mean, you must have done a lot of research then. I mean, obviously, just for the culture alone, to understand the cultural differences.
Yeah. Also gathering visual reference from Mel Ruby, our artist.
Right.
Just mountains of, this looks like this and this, because, we have scenes with, Yankee schooners and all that stuff. And the poor guy had to draw all that rigging. And
you know what though? Seriously, they did not let you down visually. I mean,
no.
Obviously, having your name on there is great, but when we're looking at a comic book, the first thing people see is the aesthetic. There's this. Right. Oh my, this could be Chuck Dixon's best writing, but my God, I can't look at these pages. But no, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Mel's a terrific artist. I mean, obviously, Rob Hunter is master inker, and then Ivan Nunez on the coloring. Man, that was the icing on the cake. He's amazing.
Yes, he is. Humble too. I see your name on another upcoming title that they're going to
yes.
Look at that. Can we talk about that, or is that to stay quiet for now?
That's also completed. It's 7 Deadly Sinners. It's an idea I've had since I started in comics, and it's basically a a biker gang retelling of the Magnificent Seven. It's
cool.
It's a 1970s retro, biker flick on done as a comic. And the special thing about it is the artist. Bob C. Harden is a guy that I met when I went to speak at the Kubert School one time. And he's an instructor there, but he was a student at the time. And he went to work for Cartoons and Hot Rod Tunes magazines. This guy can draw vehicles and cars like nobody's business. He's just a master cartoonist. And he brings all that to bear on Seven Deadly Sinners. I mean, it looks retro. It looks like it was done in the 70s. If some maniac just let two guys go crazy
Very cool.
on a big, and it's like a 110-page graphic novel with the longest car chase ever in a comic.
Oh, really? So it's like, what's that movie in the 70s with what's his name? Oh my God, famous car chase. It's like the most famous.
Well, there's Bullet. There's Vanishing Point. There's French Connection.
Connection. That's
This is like multiple vehicles. It's like it's like a Burt Reynolds movie on acid at the end.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, and you probably can't talk about it, but will you be doing any future projects with Phenom after these as well?
Yeah, they definitely want a sequel to Hunter Ninja Bear, but they haven't. I have no idea what they have in mind. They said they have some. They have an idea in mind where they want the story to go. So yeah, I'll be on board because they're just great, awesome guys to deal with. Just awesome guys to deal with.
Yeah, I was on another show promoting this. We get to pick our Kickstarters and who we want to, and I promoted it. And actually, the one gentleman, I forget his name. I'm sorry. I think he's the head of the publishing company.
Tom Finoglio, most probably.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
So a very nice guy. Now, obviously, they have quality products, it looks like, coming out, and they look like they can really make a splash in the market. But sadly, with the goal being so high, if this doesn't make it, what are their plans for distribution and getting it out there to people who do want this book? Because I want this book.
Well, as I said, it's completed. It's going to come out. It's going to be published. I think their idea of the Kickstarter was primarily promotion, but I would have liked to have seen them raise the money.
Yeah, exactly.
And they still might. They said they have plans. But they're new in comics, and they did all of that right, and they're new in crowdfunding, and they made a few missteps. I'm going to be sorry, Tom. You made a few missteps, but you're probably aware of that now.
Yeah,
you can't just snap your fingers and make one of these things work. I'm not saying that they put a lot of work into it,
right.
But there's a few things they could have done that would have helped out.
Truth of the matter is, though, I don't think it's a mistake they can't overcome because it's a good gauge of what the interest is right now. And those people, if they don't fund and they put it out there, whether through distribution or another crowd fund or just through their own website, these people will come get it, and your fans will come get it. So
yeah, it's going to do fine. None of us are worried, but like I said, I want to stress it's completed. If you do pledge for this, you're not going to wait a century to get it. It's going to come in short order.
Now, did you have to flesh out all the personalities as well, or did they kind of give you a layout of what different personality templates were?
Well, they gave me basic things, but I added, like you see the Native American girl there, Little Heart. I added her, but I love their names, and I never asked them where they came up with the names for these characters. I mean, they come up with these awesome names, particularly for the Mountain Men. And I sort of riffed off the names. Like, what would a guy name that? What would he be like? But they gave me this really terrific variety, and they used period photographs instead of using actors like so many people do. They use period photographs to say make him look like this guy, and they found some really outrageous costuming suggestions, particularly for the Mountain Men. I mean, you got a story about ninjas, but the Mountain Men are the most colorful people in the story. But the ninjas are obviously fascinating too.
But again, I think what appeals to me is going to be the dynamic of the culture shock of slamming into each other.
Because you got you got Japanese and you got Americans from the 1800s, not the most tolerant people in the world on either side.
Right. And then throw in American Indians, right?
Yeah, then you throw in American Indians, and it's sort of it becomes a toxic mix before the story's over.
We're going to show some samples here that they did because I really I mean, I know they're going to be successful no matter what, but this is exactly what the indie world needs. Professional level books like this to start generating uh, revenue into this part of the industry, because
Yeah.
without that revenue, we can't get better products out there. We can't grow. So
Right.
if you're tired of the mainstream guys and you're tired of what DC and Marvel are pushing out, or whoever, we have to start really putting our money where our mouth is. Forego that $8 Starbucks cup of coffee where they spell your name wrong for 1 week, and go pick up the book. I mean,
Yeah. I
look
mean,
at it.
that's our mission, is to bring comics to the underserved comics public who are disenchanted with the big two's output.
And there's a whole market of people that have been fans for 30, 40 years that feel alienated by the main two, that are going to they're clamoring for this.
Yeah.
They're clamoring for this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. They've been pushed away by the publishers, actively encouraged not to read their books. It's like,
right. And the
wow,
funny thing is,
that's a business plan.
and the funny thing is, not only are they not learning from it, they thought that they were going to pull on the new people that love the movies, and they didn't realize, no, they love the movies. They're not readers. They're not going to read. Why would they buy a $5 comic when for $9 a month they can get the Disney Plus channel and see all the movies?
Yeah, and where are they going to see the comic in the first place? I mean, I
Right.
always say, when the only way you could get Spider-Man was to buy the comic, but now you can get all Spider-Man you want. You can buy a game and be Spider-Man. So what do you need
Right.
the comic for?
And cartoons and movies, and
Yep.
this is just, I mean, really, it's just beautifully, beautifully illustrated. I'm excited to see this in print. I hold it in my hand, and again, such a big book. And again, everything else they're putting out there to me looks impressive, just
Yeah.
aesthetically.
Yeah, they
So
got top talent: Scott McDaniel, Tony Bedard. I mean, the stuff's just going to rock.
Scott McDaniel. Here's a funny thing. I never met him. Loved his work on Nightwing, of course. He friended me on Instagram and was following me with my Creatorcon show. Um, and then all of a sudden he unfollowed me, and I wonder if it's because he didn't get an invite to the show. And it wasn't, and my lack of invite was not because of lack of interest.
Right.
It was my budget, and I didn't know if he lived local. And I can't fly everybody in, but I would love to take care of them. So
Yeah,
so
he's in
I wonder.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so I wonder if he's like
Yeah.
a jerk.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
jerk.
I don't think so. I don't think Scott's too nice a guy. He's one of my favorite people in the world. No, there's some other reason. You're following stuff and then you get distracted. And it's
Right.
also what does social media put in front of you too.
That's
I
true
forget
too.
about sites I used to like to visit because I just don't get any reminders about them.
Right. So yeah, I mean they got a $30 soft cover. What is it? $40. They have a hardcover version. I mean, they've got plenty of swag and extras and stretch goals. And it's really all reasonably priced, guys. I mean, they'd probably be double their goal right now if they had done what a lot of other Kickstarters do. But this is fantastic, and you guys you gotta pledge Hunter Ninja Bear. Speaking of bear, that's my little bear, Kaylee Bear. That's Chuck Dixon, one of the best writers in comics. He wrote Batman, Robin. He created Bane. So my daughters, they follow comics. So
Oh, that's great.
Bane. I showed with Graham Nolan. We were at the show the other day. He looked like a Mexican wrestler, like with the luchador mask. Whatever. I'm live. Anyway, Hunter Ninja Bear. It is live on Kickstarter right now with 13 days to go. They have a ways to go to their goal. Go out there and support the indie community, especially people that are really investing the money and the time and the effort and the research and the talent to bring you professional level books and again, books that we miss, that are written just for the sheer entertainment of a good story. There's no agenda, there's no politics, there's
No.
no soapbox preaching. I always said, Chuck, tell me if I'm wrong. If a reader knows my social or political point of view as a writer, I have failed them.
Absolutely. I don't want to think about the writer. It's like I don't even like books that have like long lists of acknowledgments because it reminds me this story was written by a person. I don't want to think about the person who wrote it. I just want to have the story. And I don't want I'm an invisible hand writer. I don't want you to be thinking about me at all.
Agreed. I agree.
And my point of view in the story is whatever the character's point of view is. I mean, if he's a raging a-hole, that's who he is.
Yeah. Well, I think readers have gotten away from that because writers have injected themselves so much in a book now that if you write a character as, say, racist, because that pertains to the story, they think you're racist. It's like, listen, I'm writing fictitious characters and they all have their own individual personalities to further the story. I'm going to touch upon social topics. I'm just not going to tell you how to think about them.
Well, yeah, I mean, in my last two Levon Kade novels, I introduced this character, and when I sent him, I shouts out to Michael Hutchison. He's my nitpicker in chief. He's the first person who always reads my novels and looks for typos, and he read it, and then he said, "I hope you keep this character around. I hate him, but I love him." And so I did. I kept him around for the next book, and he's a disagreeable. He's a complete racist, but he's not stupid. He's actually an engaging character. I thought this is going to be a challenge for readers because, you hate this guy, but boy, he's really interesting. And that's the way it is. That's the duality of man. We're not all one thing.
Exactly.
And I'm not supporting racists, obviously. He's a creep. I portray him as a creep, but he's an interesting creep.
Exactly. But and that's the thing is, if you're a creator, shouldn't you make uncomfortable situations at times? Because life is uncomfortable. I mean, otherwise it's very stale. The same people that complain Superman is too boring get upset if you write a character that maybe has an ugly side. I mean, we all do. I mean, except for me, I'm pretty lovable. But
Yeah. I mean, you're, but I always look at a character. I always look at a character and go, what do I like about this character? What do I not like about this character? If it's a hero or a villain.
Right.
I mean, Batman can be a bit of a jerk sometimes, and he's a little bit too into himself, things like that. No character is perfect. Otherwise, they're completely uninteresting to write about,
right.
Because, okay, they're just going to triumph in the end. It's like, no, you got to, have a lot of stuff, a lot of conflicts, inner conflicts going on, not flaws, but inner conflicts going on.
Well, I always felt if a hero's not tested, how much of a hero are they? I mean, we love Empire Strikes Back because the bad guys did get to win for a while,
Right.
But He-Man, Skeletor's always cackling and running away with his tail between his legs. He-Man's never been tested. You don't. He's Buster Brown with muscles, and it's like, all right, but
the movie director Chuck Russell, who directed a lot of Friday the 13th, or not, Nightmare on Elm Street, stuff like that. He told me once that he got a call from Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Schwarzenegger was making a movie called Eraser, and Schwarzenegger wasn't happy with it, and he wanted Chuck Russell to come in and do some script doctoring and direct it. And Chuck said, "What's wrong with the movie?" And Arnold said, "There is no scene where I'm on my knees and friendless." Nice. And Chuck's like, Chuck told me, he says, "Wow, for someone to have that keen an understanding of who they are as a screen persona," he says, "is pretty rare." That he understood that to make this movie work, we have to see a scene where Arnold is vulnerable, because right. who believes this human freaking walking tank could ever be hurt by anybody,
right?
Because I mean, we all remember the end of Predator. I mean, that is one hell of a fight. You're not sure how that one's going to come out, and
even look at Conan.
Yeah,
she had to save him.
Yeah, I mean, that's an aspect of every Arnold movie that obviously he insists on. So but that every character needs that. Every character needs that moment. I mean, Spider-Man lifting that enormous machine off. I'll never forget that from when I was a kid. Right. He has to get that machine off of him to save Aunt May. It's like, wow, that's incredible.
And that's when you root for him, because to me, and that was one of my biggest complaints about the Kenobi series and things going on, is standing defiant in the face of adversity is heroism. Laying down on your knees and going, I can't do it. And then somebody else comes and picks you up. To me, it's not inspiring. It's not inspiring. That's not the hero's journey for me.
Because that's what we would all be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
We would just go, man, this alien's going to kill me. You know, I hope it's painless.
Yeah, really. Getting in the fetal position and going, somebody help me is not inspiring me. It's not making me want, you know, Rocky didn't do that, right? We didn't watch Rocky go in the corner and go, I can't do it. Mickey, throw in a towel. I don't get it. I don't get it. I think it's reflective of our society and how they've found empowerment in victimization, self-victimization, and I'm just not for that.
Well, it's also the elevation of the female character as a rescuer and stuff. They're trying to turn the patriarchy on its head, which is a political statement of its own.
And what kills me about that is there are good examples of strong, powerful women where you didn't have to put down the man. Terminator, the first Wonder Woman movie, Alien.
Yep.
Those were strong women that carried themselves, but you didn't have to down the man to do it.
I made my bones in this business writing strong female characters, but they had to be believable. They had to be human. They couldn't be flawless Mary Sues who everything comes easy to just because they're a woman, you know. And you know, I'm all about. I mean, I love the, you know, as goofy as they are, I love the Resident Evil movies because, you know, I believe in this character. But to just, you know, have girl power for the sake of girl power with these really vapid, uninteresting female personas, it's like it's having the reverse effect that I think they wish for.
Right.
It's like, you know, it's like in India. I watch a lot of Bollywood movies. And in Bollywood, they had a problem. Not in Bollywood. In India, they had a problem with women being attacked, you know, and it was becoming like a national epidemic. So they made a series of movies showing how tough and independent women could be. But they really did a great job. And they made some great movies, these unbelievable. And it was basically to empower women. Like, you don't have to take this anymore. You can stand up to this. And because there was a real patriarchy there.
Right.
And they became extraordinarily popular films in India. And that was the right way to do it. But just to have the women swanning around being perfect, it's like, I'm not buying.
And that's the thing is, again, it goes back to what I said. The strength of a character, of a person, whether you're male or female, is how you stand in the face of adversity. Not that you just walk past it like it's, excuse me, I'm good. You know?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there's got to be a challenge. You've got to be tested.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but you know, it's all part of bad writing is what it comes down to. It doesn't come down to politics, and it's just bad writing. Like, I want to accomplish this, but I have no idea how to do it. It's like, you know, I'll watch recent romantic comedies with my wife. And my problem with recent romantic comedies that I don't have with romantic comedies from the past is in recent efforts, the romance isn't earned. Right. You know, in a classic romantic comedy, we have to fall in love with both people before they fall in love with each other. Right. And I don't ever see that happen now. It's like, well, why are these two together? There's no reason, you know, because I love screwball romantic comedies from the 30s and 40s. They're some of my favorite movies. And I watch the stuff today, and it's like, I don't buy this for a second. I don't buy that he's into her or she's into him, you know, because there's no story there that makes me believe it.
No, I agree with you. And yeah, I think writing has gotten lazy because I think the formula now is, well, what can we throw out there for the least expense to get the most return? And I think that's in everything, not just, you know, creativity now. I mean, you buy a box of cereal, it's half full, and you spend $8. You know?
I think they call it sizeflation.
Yeah. So I guess instead of life's like a box of chocolates, life is like a box of Cheerios.
Well, part of the problem is the enormous amount of content they're putting out now. So they really are pretty much scraping the bottom of the barrel for writers. If you got a pulse in Hollywood, you can probably get a job.
I know plenty of people, like including myself, that would love a chance at
Netflix. No, you're absolutely right. But they're only going back to their pool over and over again. I mean, look, every other day, J.J. Abrams is announced to be part of some franchise we all
Right.
love. It's like, isn't there anybody else? Don't you have another? You have a Rolodex with one card in it? I mean,
well, it goes back to what you said before, though. An artist, they can draw something, and the trust is built based on what's in front of you. With a writer, you have to take the time to sit down and read this entire manuscript, book, whatever, that they don't have the patience, time, or desire to do.
no.
We're not a billboard like an artist can be.
Yeah.
So we're selling trust. Trust me that I can write a story.
Right.
But the only problem is, how do I make you trust me without handing you this big story that you have to sit and read? So
right.
it
And
is a
at
tough
the beginning,
challenge.
how do I start a track record? How do I prove
Right.
myself? I got to get something published so you'll pay attention to me. That's the biggest hurdle, is that first big break. But that's why so much of the stuff in Hollywood is based on comics,
Right.
because they can see it, they can see the story, and trust
It's
me,
already scripted out for them.
yeah. Well, but also they can just see, hey, this is how the movie will begin, and I've been in lots of meetings with producers, and they'll look at a graphic novel, they'll look at the first few pages and the last few pages. That's all they look at,
Really?
and that's what they base their opinion on whether or not they're interested.
The first and the third act.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the opening and the climax, that's all they care about.
Right. Rod wanted to ask you, what's your process of character creation?
I just sort of think about the character till they're sort of alive in my head, and then it's all determined by what they do, not what they say or what anybody says about them. It's what they do, and then you present them a bunch of challenges, and how they rise or fall to them tells you everything you want to know about the character. And I have a hard time articulating it because I talked to a woman who wrote soap operas a couple of years ago, and she said, I read some of your stuff, and she says, I'm amazed at how quickly you can get us involved with the character and get them right into the action. And I said, well, it's my mortal fear of boring people. She said, I wish I could do it. She said, I have to do this all the time, but she says, you do it so quickly. And I said, seriously, I write it, the opening scenes of the character, and then I pare it down to only what's essential. And then, of course, I'm learning about the character as we go along. Right. And then they become fully alive in my head. And then I know in most instances how they're going to react to what the various stimuli I put in front of them.
Well, I mean, it always starts from the basic fight or flight instinct, and then you go from there, because, flight doesn't mean actually turning and running from a fight. It could be projecting, defensive,
right,
guarded emotionally with walls, you look at anybody around. I mean, and I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask, but, we've been around a while. We've run into a lot of people.
right.
So you kind of pick up how different personalities, how people act in certain situations, and this and that, and you may not take from a specific person in mind, but just knowing that this is a real reaction that someone would have to a situation can be applied.
Yeah, a lot of times my characters are an amalgam of people I've met or know. They're not one person.
Right.
I might take a voice from someone I know. Like I'll say, well, how would they say this? But the other important thing about your characters is it's become kind of a cliche amongst writers, but it's true, is what they want. It's the most important thing in your story is, what does your character want? Superman wants to be accepted as a human being. Batman wants to make right by his parents. He's vowed to fight injustice. Darth Vader wants his son to come into the family business. It's what they want, and that's what drives them. And then once you have that determined, then you pretty much know, the course of your character, and making the reader understand that as well, but without being, direct about it. So the readers are smart, and they'll understand this stuff, and you have to leave the reader room to bring their own understanding to anything you write. It's really, really important. And if I've learned anything over my writing career, it's that lesson. That I sort of intuited, but then over years began to articulate, that you got to leave readers room to project themselves into and onto the story. And that's.
I'm glad you said that, because one of the biggest issues I had seen with prior indie books, and sometimes still, is they unintentionally talk down to the reader because they feel they have to narrate everything. This isn't Morgan Freeman in the Wormhole. We have to leave room. I mean, and let the art tell some of the story as well. A facial expression in a certain word or gesture can tell you a lot more than that whole paragraph you just wrote.
Just as an artist will
Yeah.
tell you, what you don't draw is every bit as important as what you do draw.
Right.
What you don't write is every bit as important. The room you leave for the reader. My favorite opening line of all fiction is "Postman always rings twice," and it's they threw me off the hay truck around noon. That's the first line of the book, and you're instantly engaged. What kind of person gets thrown off a hay truck?
What did you
Why did
do?
they throw him off
And
the hay
who
truck?
and why? Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he got thrown out of a limousine. You know, he
Right.
got thrown off a hay truck.
What did you
So,
do?
so it's like, wow, I want to know everything about this guy, and I only know one thing.
Aaron said a journey of character development from nothing to something. And that's the thing. It doesn't even have to be nothing to something. It's something to something else. I mean, we all are evolving in some way, whether it's regression or progression or stagnation. I mean, stagnation is still a story to tell,
Right.
that someone's not growing. Like all these events that are happening to them and they're not learning from them, or whatever the case may be. But I always find the human aspect of things very interesting to me.
Yeah. Also, I mean, when we meet a character, we're not meeting them at the beginning of their story generally. We're
Right.
meeting them in the middle of their story. So they might be on a downslope, or they might be heading toward a high. You just never know. We're picking them up at the point where we choose to pick them up.
Right. Michael said Phil, and he said Chuck.
Michael.
Yeah, you're being scolded or you're being hailed. I don't
I
know.
don't know.
So talking about character development, we mentioned before Levon Kade. So let's bring this up. This is the newest novel you have out, book 10. I clicked that and it didn't. There you go. Currently right now on Amazon. It's available as a Kindle as well or a paperback. Tell us about Levon Kade. You touched on him before, but tell us about this.
Well, Levon Kade, I mean, it starts with the Punisher. I love writing the Punisher, my favorite comic character to write. And he's the only comic book character that I would think of stories for even after I wasn't writing him anymore. And so
Okay.
it was an itch I had to scratch. And I thought, well, let me create my own vigilante character, who's in that genre, but not the same as the Punisher. Levon's an Alabama native. He has a young daughter, so he's a single dad. So he has something to protect. And much like the Punisher, he just makes trouble for himself. He sees problems he can't walk around, and they always complicate his life more and more. In many of these books, he's on the run from the law as well as from the people that he's pissed off. But there's always a reckoning point where Levon, at least temporarily, solves his problems. But generally, in solving them, creates even more. So Levon's Prey is like the third book in like a trilogy within the series about Levon going up against a child trafficking ring, which goes all the way up to high levels of government, local government. And Levon's Prey is where he basically, takes care of them. So exposes the ring to sunlight.
Now, did you have to do a lot of research as far as trafficking and things like that? Because I remember a while ago in the news, the former president mentioned coyotes and people laughed at him because they thought he meant dogs. So I mean, there's terminology that is associated with it, especially
Right.
the border patrol, etc. I mean, did you have to do a lot of research?
Well, with that aspect, with illegal immigration, I dealt with in an earlier book. This is basically trafficking here domestically out of foster homes, which happens.
Oh, wow.
Sadly. And I talked to someone who was a foster child, and she was very frank and very candid about her experiences. And she told me this like 5 years ago. And you're a writer, you put it in the back of your head. I said, well, I'm gonna look into this further from how it works, and then write about it. And the thing is, I want to caution readers that I don't get graphic or salacious with this material. I treat this material as arm's length as I can. because I don't like reading about this stuff myself, but I felt I had to write about it. But I'm not like advocating for anything like that, or I'm not trying to shock readers. It's still an action, crime novel.
And be careful, don't do like what's his name from the Who, Peter.
Yeah. No, I didn't do that kind of research. I didn't do it. I was not curious on that. I looked at the foster. I looked at criminal records and the foster care system and the shocking number of foster children who go missing. And they didn't go missing. They didn't run away. Right. And it's a shock. These stories are shocking, but no, I don't delve into the more salacious, grimmer aspects of this. But it'll piss you off. You'll hate the bad guys in this. You'll like everything these bad guys, everything that Levon does, these bad guys, they got coming. And you're on his side.
See, and that's another writing tool. Have the bad guys that people love to hate and the bad guys people hate to love.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to make them nuanced. In this case, they weren't terribly nuanced. They were just skeevy people. But I do make them as three-dimensional as possible.
I mean, if you look at all the prior books, and there's a lot in the series, as you see 11 books, and a lot of reviews, 100, 73, 92, and there's high praise, 4.6 out of 5. I mean, obviously, your name alone would, garner trust in readers. But if not, if you for whatever reason, weren't familiar with Chuck's work, at least his prose work, go take a look at the reviews. They're really, really good. And obviously, you don't get to put out 11 books in a series if they haven't been successful. So you can get it, the newest one right here, or any of the others, in Kindle or paperback form here on Amazon. Prime.
And most are in audio, and this one will have an audio book soon.
That's cool. How do you deal with like voice actors and stuff?
Well, they let me pick the guy. I needed a guy who could do the drawl, because the first guy they brought to me sounded like he was from Connecticut. And it's like, no, I need a guy who has a natural drawl, even in the narration parts, so it brings you into the character. And he does an awesome job. And apparently loves the books, because he keeps asking when's the next one coming out.
Oh, good. Well, you know what? That passion will come out in his read.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, great reviews here. So check that out. Chuck's got a lot of stuff going on, stuff we can't talk about. But on a personal note, we also have other things that he's doing right now, and let me just cue them up. Archavan Comics. I'm going to post that up right here. Tell us about this.
Well, this is a digital comic service. You can read it on any device. It's not a phone app yet, but we're working on that. But you can read it on your phone if you have access to the internet. And it's high res. You can read these comics in crystal clarity on the big TV in your family room. And it's a whole lot of different creators from all over the world. I think I mentioned it was free, but I'm going to mention that again. It's free. There's no cost. You can subscribe to series, but they'll just get reminders of new episodes. And I got a lot of material up here. Some of it is reprinted from the past. Some of it is stuff that I'm doing now currently. And it's a great venue for me because it's a quick and easy way to publication, because there's no printing costs. And it's kind of a different storytelling medium for me, but I'm really digging it. And it's creating content. And it's complete freedom because, I don't own the company or anything, but I just do stuff and they put it up. There's no questions. A lot of times, Vox Day, who's running the company, he doesn't even know I've done something until he sees it show up on ArcTunes.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least 10 so far right here that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Some of the stuff's reprinted from the past. Some of it is new, and some of it is. They have me introduce. I choose Golden Age comics to represent, and they allow me to choose them and do introductions. And a lot of them are like background introductions on the writers or artists or whatever.
And it's different genres. There's cartoon,
war,
humor,
comedy, adventure,
war. Yeah.
That's kind of fun. Cool.
That's Archavan, ARKHAVEN, guys. It's www.archavan.com.
Yeah, and you want to look for ArcTunes. That's the digital site.
Okay, ArcTunes. Cool. ARKTOONS. Very cool.
Yeah.
And then we have, remove it because I want to, here we go. All right. Subscribe star, Chuck Dixon.
Yep. Yep. It's just that it mostly formed to help me finance the Arctoon stuff because I got to pay my artists. I just added a $1 tier this week. So there's a $5 tier and a $1 tier. The $5 tier, you get some physical goodies, signed comics and stuff, some exclusive stuff, and a lot of digital, gifts. And then the $1, it's all the digital stuff. But I preview a lot of stuff here. That's why a lot of stuff's blurry. It's only subscribers can see. So I'm a lot of times. I mean, if I get an email from an artist and he's working on something, a work in progress, or he's done a pitch piece, I'll put it up here, and you'll see it here first. Like that. I sent out my last digital goodie was the script for El Cazador #7, which was never published at CrossGen. So I have the script for that unpublished comic.
Very cool. Very cool. And it's affordable, guys. The money you spend on junk that you don't like, cable, you don't even watch. There's nothing on. 85,000 channels and nothing
on. You spend most of your time looking.
Yeah. Let's watch a movie. An hour and a half later, you haven't found anything you want to watch. You're like, I'm going to bed.
That's it. That's the same thing. Or I'm going to watch a couple of YouTube videos.
And that's www.subscribestar.com. Cool. We can drop all those links after the fact.
All right. I appreciate it, Phil. I hate doing the, call by midnight tonight kind of pitches, but, it's the business now.
No, yeah. I mean, when you're independent, you've got to market yourself, and so people understand. But the truth of the matter is, though, your resume should at the very least sell most of this itself. I mean, you are a well-loved, well-established name in the industry. And like I said, you and Chris Claremont and Peter David are my 3 favorite comic book writers.
Well, that's good company. That's good company.
And for different reasons.
Well, obviously.
Well,
we couldn't be more different people.
Right. I mean, just even writing style, vast writing styles, but yet just really know how to craft the story. And that's another question I have for you. I know what I think is the answer, but nobody cares about my answer. They care about yours.
Okay.
Is there a difference between being a good writer and a good storyteller?
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, you can be a lousy writer and be a good storyteller.
That's what I think.
Yeah,
and
you
I might
can be a lousy writer. Yeah, because I forgot what movie it was I saw, and I said this was years ago, and I said this movie is like it was Phantasm. I said this movie is that's how long ago it was. I said this movie is like if my sister-in-law told me a dream she had last night and they made a movie out of it. But this telling of the dream was great. It made no sense.
but I always thought the movie was weird because the perspective was so tight. Like there was nobody else in the town, nobody else experiencing any of this. It was just them.
They had no money for anything. And they put every cent on the screen.
Yeah, because I feel that there is a difference between being a good writer and a good storyteller, and you can be one or the other or both. Now, would you consider yourself, and obviously you're in a humble way, do you consider yourself both a good writer and storyteller, or do you feel you lean stronger to one way or the other?
I'm primarily a storyteller. I never think of myself as a wordsmith. I do my best. The prose brings it out. You got to be a wordsmith in prose. But like I said, there's a lot you can leave up to the reader,
Right.
And so I rely on that heavily. In comics, I look at great comic writers like Archie Goodwin and people like that, and I go, wow, they're awesome. But I can come up to that level. I understand the medium, and I'm conversant with the medium enough that I can stand beside Denny O'Neil and Archie Goodwin and Larry Hama. I feel like I've earned that over the years.
Sure.
In literature, you're up against, Jack London, Stephen Crane, Willa Cather. I look at Cormac McCarthy's books and my jaw just drops. Like, how does he do this? I could never do this. So somebody said recently, I set out my writing career to be, Ernest Hemingway. And I said, I set out my writing career to be a guy who wrote paperbacks in the 70s. If I can be that good, I'll be happy.
Well, Rod, to clarify what I mean, no, it's more than writing, grammar and spelling. It's like, for example, the difference between prose, like you said, in a comic book.
Right.
You could sit down in a campfire and make up a story off the top of your head and engage and entertain everybody around. Does that mean you can write a book?
No.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into being a writer besides grammar and spelling and research and how you craft a long-term journey. And like, look at J.R.R. Martin. He's had like 100 characters in there that he had to weave together into this craft and this tale. Could you tell a cool story that's a little more linear? Yeah, but would you be able to craft that tale? Maybe not.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about as far as writer compared to storyteller. And I think when you can combine the two, that's when you really got a superstar like Chuck.
I mean, you look at Shakespeare. I mean, Shakespeare was a hell of a plotter, hell of a storyteller. But boy, the language, it's so beautiful. The language is so beautiful.
Right.
That's, even when he was making up words, it's just, and the thing, I always say I'm an invisible hand writer because I don't want you to think about the writing. I don't want to slow you down by writing some, marvelous turn of phrase that'll make you realize what a genius I am. So, so yeah, I mean, they're two skills, but they don't necessarily have to go together. And there's a lot of people who write beautifully and the stuff's not engaging.
Right.
So,
Agreed. Yeah. You could be a wordsmith, like you said, but are you engaging? Are you as a writer? I mean, I would think, and you tell me because you have way more experience. The key to a good story is those relatable characters that you could see a little piece of yourself in there, or at least aspire to be,
or at least sympathize with.
Right.
I use the example at the end of the movie Rear Window when Raymond Burr confronts Jimmy Stewart, and he's the killer. He's the murderer. He's murdered his wife and buried her in the backyard, and you don't like him and you don't know much about him. But there's this scene where he's standing in the dark and you can't see his face, and he basically says to Jimmy Stewart, "Why are you doing this to me?
Right.
Why are you doing?" And for that brief moment, you sympathize with him and he becomes human. And it makes the end of the movie so much more impactful because he's become a real person to you now.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to spoil it, but I just watched the second to last episode of this season's Stranger Things. And there's a character, Papa, in there that does a lot of bad stuff. And in a similar fashion, they humanize him even for that moment.
Yeah.
Justifying why he's doing what he's doing in his mind is an altruistic thing. It was for a good reason. It's all about perspective.
Right.
So, no spoilers on Rear Window.
Well, if you haven't seen Rear Window by now, you're probably never going to see it. So.
Yeah. That's actually one of my favorite movies, and definitely my favorite Hitchcock movie.
It's perfect. It's seamless. Yeah, it's seamless.
And if I may say so myself, my wife to me is a Grace Kelly. She's just beautiful and stunning, and so. Here's a funny thing. My character in my book is Grace O'Connor, but O'Connor is her adopted name. O'Connor's her real name. She's adopted by a man named Seamus Kelly. So it was a little play I put in there for me because
Very cool.
North by Northwest with Cary Grant. Yes, that's another big one.
Yeah, that's a good one. The evolution of that movie is fascinating. Hitchcock was hired with the screenwriter to do, I can't remember the name of the movie now, The Wreck of the Merry Deer. They were supposed to turn The Wreck of the Merry Deer, a novel, into a movie. And Hitchcock got quickly bored with that. and said to Layman, let's write a thriller instead. The studio didn't know they were doing it.
Nice.
And Layman said, what will we base it on? And Hitchcock says, here's a list of all the crazy ideas I've ever wanted to put in a thriller. Write a story that brings them all together. And so Layman did that, and it's North by Northwest. And the only one he couldn't get in there was an Eskimo is fishing on ice. And instead of a fish, pulls up a dismembered human hand out of a hole in the ice. And Layman says, I can't figure out how to get that in here.
That's great.
And then they went to the studio and said, we're not making that movie, we're making this one. So
you know, when you start getting enough clout that you can start doing that must be wonderful.
Cloud is good. And the Wreck of the Mary Deer is a great movie. They did make it, but it's not by Hitchcock.
So obviously there's things that you can't talk about they have, you know, coming up, but we just want to remind everybody, you follow Chuck on his social media, go to Archavan, Arctoons, Archavan Comics, go to his Subscribe Star. There's so many places you go that if you haven't been, you can follow Chuck's progress of what he's doing, what's coming up next, so you're not caught in the dark, because there's a lot of great stuff. He's still writing some great indie comics, prose novels, and you're just keeping busy.
Yep, I'm happy. I wake up in the morning and go, what do I want to write? And I write it. So
that's beautiful. And your deadline is whatever you make it.
That's exactly right. When it's finished, it's finished.
Do you believe in the 3 arc template of a story? You know, the 3 act.
The 3 act, yeah. It's weird. When I first started at DC, they paid for me to take the Robert McKee story structure course because all the writers and editors had taken it. And they said we're not saying that you don't know how to write, but he shows you a lot of stuff and it gives us a shared language. And they were right. He articulated a lot of stuff about writing that I'd never heard put into words before. So we were all basically put us all on the same page. When I got back from it, it was a 3-day course. And I stopped at DC before I left town. And then he said, what did you get out of it? I said, well, I got a lot out of it. You know, some of the stuff I didn't agree with him. And he said, well, that's fine, you know. And I said, but I'll never understand 3-act structure. And then he said, don't worry, you do it anyway. Even if you don't understand it, you do it. I was like, okay. So I think I understand a little bit better now. To me, the only value of 3-act structure, to know it for a person who's not a writer, is to recognize the end of the second act in a movie, because that's the time you want to go pee if you have to. Because there's always, between the end of the second act and beginning of the third, there's always like a little pause in the story. It's just enough time to run out into the lobby.
That is funny. That little lull. Quick, empty the bladder. That is hilarious. Chuck, it's always it's a pleasure. Thanks for coming on again. I have a good time talking with you. I mean, the last time you came on, you and I think talked for 2 hours after the show, which was cool. You had some very interesting stories. I mean, stories that we're not going to get into here, but
which we're not going to do tonight because we got to the end of the second act.
Yeah, there you go. You got to go pee. But it's okay. I got to get ready for San Diego next week and a bunch of other stuff. But it is a great pleasure to talk with you. You're a really, really cool, down-to-earth guy. Again, I appreciate all your contributions to comic books and literature in general. And I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much, Phil. I always have a good time. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime you want back on to promote anything or just talk, you let me know.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Have a great evening.
You too. Thanks.
Well, everybody, that was Chuck Dixon. Obviously, he doesn't need an introduction. He doesn't need an explanation of who he is now, so we won't give it. Great guy. You know, I have to tell you, if you get the chance to see him at a convention, you know, when things calm down, plethora of knowledge and some great stories. It'll be awesome. And Chuck, this is your chance to go pee if you need to, or if you have to go, I understand. He's laughing. But it is great to talk with him. And to be honest with you, I usually have a lot of artists on. So when I can get a writer to speak to, as you know, I'm aspiring and trying to be a writer. It's just great to get some knowledge and some tips from the people that have been so successful. So thanks again to Chuck for coming out. Thanks to all of you for coming out. And you can watch this on reruns, and it's on YouTube, Creatorcon event with all the other episodes. I just want to remind everybody, Tragedy issue 3 is on Indiegogo right now. Issue 4 is going to Kickstarter August 16th. And we got a lot of stuff in the works. I will be at San Diego Comic-Con next week. I will be posting about it more. And follow Legendary Illustrations. I represent a lot of great artists that may not be household names yet, but you're going to want to get on board now because you're going to kick yourself if you don't. Because when they make it big and we raise all the prices, you're going to be mad. Anyway, have a great night. I appreciate you. I'm going to leave you with what I always leave you with. Be legendary and have fun storming the castle.